Hello, welcome to Why Wait Till Sunday. I'm your host, Alfred, and this is a forgotten episode of Why Wait Till Sunday. We are going to talk about a, I guess it's a quintet, 5 players who I think are fairly forgotten in the college football landscape after a strange COVID, you know, COVID darkened 2020 season. We had a lot of weird things going on, right? We had opt outs, we had a lot of transfers. We've got, basically a free flowing transfer portal that can open at any moment for any player for any time. So these guys, some of them didn't play because their teams didn't even have a football season. Some of them didn't play because they opted out. Some of them opted out and transferred. Some of them only had 4 games or so and were injured for most of them. So it's really a grab bag of why the 2020 season was basically a complete waste for these 5 players. But all of these players in 2019 were very promising. And I think these guys need to be on your radar. If you are in a Devy league, these guys could be last round picks, depending on how deep the Devy league is. I'm not really talking about a startup, maybe in a deep startup, but in a Devy league that is going to have 5 or 6 or 7 rounds. And there's already a bunch of players rostered. I think these guys should all be potentially last round picks. For Campus to Canton, these are going to be late picks or probably not waiver pickups because their 2019s were good. But in a startup, you're talking about very late picks for all of these guys. And I think they could really blow up in 2021 and get back on an NFL path, get back on a very exciting trajectory. And we're going to all be, everyone in the dynasty space and redraft space is going to be all over them by this time next year when they are, preparing for the combine or pro day or however they decide to do it next year. But these are forgotten 5. That's what we're doing this week. So let's get right into it. First, we are going to talk about Cameron Ross. He is a wide receiver signed with Connecticut. That's UConn. They do have a football program in addition to the basketball team. He's 5'9", 170. So he's a small dude, but, that's his most recent weight. But, UConn didn't even play in 2020, so maybe they haven't updated that. He could be up to 180. I don't really know. The facts are he lands on this list because he was awesome as a freshman in 2019. He had a 28% weighted dominator rating in 2019 as a true freshman. That was second in the country for freshman wide receiver. He's obviously small. He played in a group of 5 conference for UConn, and that's probably the biggest thing. It doesn't really matter what your metrics are. If you are in a G5 conference, even if you break out early, still does not really project a whole lot of confidence going into, the NFL future. I think there's a pretty good bet he'll be very good for UConn in 2021, but in terms of his NFL future, still remains to be seen. Breaking out, I've done some stuff, even breaking out at a very high bar, 30% in a G5 conference puts you on okay, you're at least maybe going to get drafted, but it's not like a slam dunk. I mean, it's really not a sure thing in a G5 conference that these guys even get drafted at all, much less very high draft picks. Definitely better than not doing that in a G5 conference, of course, but it's not like any kind of slam dunk. I'm going to say this guy's definitely headed to an NFL path. But I'm not going to ignore the second best weighted dominator for a freshman in 2019, and he's forgotten. I mean, I don't even know if he has an ADP, even in a Campus to Campton on the college side. I will say the tape doesn't wow me. He doesn't appear to be exceptionally athletic. I didn't see anything, burst or, moves after the catch, route running that blew me away. He obviously did enough to have a very nice dominator rating, but his raw stats were not too impressive. And then, he did qualify for the Dominator rating, but I thought I'd maybe be a little bit more impressed. I couldn't find a lot of athletic measurements for him, testing for him. Although his raw stats were actually better than I thought. I just looked him up while we were talking. 60 receptions, 723 and 4. As a true freshman. So yeah, that was a good market share, but also the raw was pretty good. I mean, 700 yards as a true freshman is great. I don't care how you slice it. So that's Cameron Ross. He's probably the least exciting. That's why he's fifth on this list for me, both in terms of NFL potential and in terms of, what I think he might do even at the college level next year. I really am not well versed on what the UConn depth chart looks like, what their quarterback's going to look like. I just don't know that much about UConn football, to be totally honest with you. But at the very least, I think a guy who's going to challenge for, 30% of a team's passing share, keep him in mind if the UConn ever finds their way onto a DFS slate next year. Certainly have him on your radar. And depending on how deep a Devy league you have is, potentially last round dart throw. And certainly in a campus to Canton, he provides some value because you'll at least get one more year, maybe two, of good college production at an incredibly cheap ADP. And, maybe he makes his way onto an NFL roster. I'm not saying that's impossible. Next on the list, number 4, Emmerian Brown, wide receiver who is now at South Carolina. He transferred out of Georgia Tech. He's now in the SEC at South Carolina, and that's why he's very exciting. I mean, in terms of tiers, I wanted to include Cameron Ross because he had such a great freshman season. But there's a big tier gap when we go to Brown here, who not only did something pretty impressive in the Power 5 at Georgia Tech, but now he's going to be in the SEC. So Brown had the top weighted dominator for a true freshman in 2019, and he did it in a Power 5 conference. So he almost got to 30%. It was like 29 and change percent of Georgia Tech's weighted dominator is yards and touchdown production through the air, with the yards weighted for 80% and the touchdowns only weighted for 20% of that. That gives just more credit to the yards rather than touchdowns. But a lot of that weighted dominator, getting him close to 30% does come in the form of touchdowns. He had 7, which tied Calvin Johnson's freshman record at Georgia Tech. His receiving and yards market share were good. Receptions in the 15 to 20, I think 15%, and yards was about 24%, but the touchdowns was almost like 50%. So that pulls up the whole dominator rating when you include the touchdowns. However, sniffing 30%, he didn't quite get there, but we're talking very, very close. And getting to that bar as a true freshman in a Power 5 conference is almost a slam dunk. He is going to be drafted into the NFL. And even I think preliminary results show about 75% since 2006 of players who do that as a freshman in a Power 5 conference go on to be a day 1 or day 2 pick. That's top 3 rounds in the NFL draft. This guy's going to test well too. He had a personal record 10.4 seconds in the 100 meter in high school. That's like, 4.4 flirting with 4.3. He is going to test well. He's going to have a 40 time that knocks everyone's socks off whenever he goes to the combine or has a pro day or whatever. And he plays like it too. It does translate onto the field. He can burn you. He will put one move on you and get past a corner and just be wide open. He has a feel for routes. I think he makes sharp cuts. He does look pretty explosive when he just kind of opens up gear upfield. There's multiple instances I saw of him having good body control, kind of contorting, catching, adjusting to the ball in tight spaces. A couple of good, he had 7 touchdowns, so his highlight reel has plenty of those. And he's got some where he's like catching it in the corner of the end zone, with a guy kind of close to him and just body control. He looks like a receiver. I'll put it that way. He looks like a wide receiver. He does not just look like a track star. He does look like he's got nuance and feel for the position and for being a good wide receiver. Now, here's the big issue. He's listed at 5'9" and a dreadful 165 pounds. So we're talking Devontae Smith size. However, that was as a sophomore. Hopefully he can do a little bit of work in the weight room, maintain that explosiveness. And, by the time he's going to the combine, he'll be 180, maybe 178, something like that. And, right now you can get him as a throw-in a trade in Campus to Canton leagues. You can get him extremely. I mean, I don't even know. Again, like Cameron Ross, I don't know if he's got an ADP at all in a C2C. We're doing mock drafts into round 15. Some drafts have gone to round 20 for campustocanton.com, our parent website for this podcast. And he hasn't been drafted in the top 20 rounds yet. So, you're looking at a very late pick, even in a format that rewards college production. And then, if you're talking about Devi, he'd have to be 20 rounds deep or something. I have heard of Devi leagues that have like 40 rounds. So when you're talking that deep, he comes into play. But I think if he is even kind of good for South Carolina this year in the SEC with his speed, he is going to be a very fast riser. He's going to do it in the SEC. So that's going to take away any competition concerns that he may have had, for Georgia Tech in the ACC. His sophomore year, he just kind of didn't click with Jeff Sims, the freshman quarterback who does struggle with his deep ball. And, it was incredible. I really thought Brown was going to, be a big part of that offense. And they just really did a lot of running with Jeff Sims, the quarterback. And then obviously Jamir Gibbs had an amazing season, but Emmerian Brown was pretty much forgotten, which I guess is a little concerning, to be honest. If he's a stud, why did he get overlooked so much? But, they're transitioning to a totally different offense under Collins and the OC there. I don't know what to make of it. He was great as a freshman. Flip on his tape. He's everything you think a 5'9", 165-pound deep threat would be. He's exceptionally fast, but I was impressed with the actual route running and some of the body control, honestly, because like I said, he does not look like just a fast guy who runs downfield. He looks like a actual quality wide receiver. Gonna need to put on some weight and to get, the eventual NFL draft capital and stuff. But the production as a true freshman is just absolutely phenomenal, and very excited to see what he can do. Now he's going to be in the SEC. Probably get a quarterback upgrade, honestly. Georgia Tech's quarterback in 2019 was pretty horrible. And then Jeff Sims has a lot of work to do before he becomes an actual good quarterback. He was pretty fun for fantasy, running around and getting a lot of the rushing production, but as an actual quarterback, getting the ball to his playmakers, he has some work to do. And unfortunately, Brown just said, I need to go somewhere that's really going to feature me. And I think South Carolina will. They lost a lot of wide receivers over the last, really 3 years. Every single year they've had a pretty good wide receiver drafted. Deebo Samuel, Brian Edwards, and now I think Shi Smith is going to be an interesting player. Probably day 3 pick for Smith, but he was really good last year. And so South Carolina is now hurting for wide receivers. They do not have a lot of returning production, and Brown's already getting a little bit of good steam coming out of spring reports. So, look for him to pop off. And once that happens, we're going to be, people are going to start remembering the name. They're going to go back. You're going to see a bunch of tweets and say, oh, well, actually, Brown broke out as a freshman at Georgia Tech. Ha, we all forgot about it. Well, do not forget about it. He's a really good player. And when he starts showing something in the SEC next year, don't be behind the curve, be in front of the curve so you can already have him rostered. When everyone else on Twitter starts getting hyped about this guy, oh, he's so fast, oh, he's the next Henry Ruggs, blah, blah, blah. I'm telling you now, this guy's great. He's really going to be good. I'm excited for Brown next year for South Carolina, who needs playmakers desperately, and he's a good bet to do it. All right, number 3, another Brown. We have Christopher Brown Jr., pretty much the exact opposite of Emmerian Brown. Christopher Brown is 6'1", 235-pound listed running back out of Cal. So we got a guy completely on the other side of the country and completely on the other side of the BMI scale. He's an absolute beast. I mean, 6'1", 235 running back. That is massive, massive, massive. And in 2019, he was pretty dominant on a terrible Cal offense as a true sophomore. If you filter him for all the second-year backs in 2019, he had a 43% rush market share that was 7th highest in the country for a second-year running back. He was ahead of Kenny Gainwell, Jamar Jefferson, Javonte Williams. You may have heard of some of those guys, and ahead of some people really like Cameron Harris out of Miami. He was well ahead of all those guys in terms of his market share for a Power 5 team, which is Cal. He was also 7th highest in the country in yards per team play for a second-year running back in that class. Again, ahead of all those other names I just mentioned in terms of his efficiency. So he had efficiency, he had volume, and then he was the second highest dominator rating in all of the NCAA for a running back in year 2. That was 32% of his team's yards from scrimmage and touchdowns for Cal as a second-year running back. So in his class of second-year running backs in 2019, he was really good. This guy was, at least a top 10 performer. You could argue higher than that. I mean, second highest dominator rating. That's one of the best metrics we can use, especially when you're talking about Power 5 competition. And he was even efficient with the 7th highest yards per team play. I really like that. Yards per team, dominator rating kind of gets you the guys who can be workhorses. And then yards per team play kind of overlaid on top of that tells you who was just literally just a volume back versus who, did something with that volume. So he was a volume back, but also a 7th highest in the country, kind of in that a little more of that efficiency type metric. He is a strong runner. He has some wiggle. I would say he is not a plotter despite being 6'1", 235. He's got some burst. I mean, he'll make little moves. He will make cuts. He will string together, a juke step and a stiff arm. They are kind of power moves. I wouldn't say he's got like spin moves and jump cuts necessarily, but he will put a one cut on you and he will stiff arm you. And when you're 6'1", 235 running downhill, that stiff arm gets you a long way. Being 6'1", he runs a bit upright like these taller running backs do. But he gets away with it. I looked at his stuff from 2019 and I was pretty impressed. I mean, he definitely shows more than what you would think a plotter at 235 pounds would do. He's a little more nimble on his feet than you would think. And he had 22 receptions as a true sophomore in 2019. He's got a legitimate receiving skills. I saw a toe tap on a comeback on the sideline where he caught it, where if a receiver had done it, you would have been like, oh, that's great. He came back, fell out of bounds with 2 feet in, caught the ball for a first down, I think it was. He also had a contested catch in the end zone. And both of these passes were over 15 yards in the air. So we're not talking about like dump offs. I mean, he does do some screens. That was on tape as well. But these are legitimate, downfield receptions that I saw this guy who's 6'1", 235 doing. I'm pretty impressed. I mean, the receiving ability and a guy that size who can absolutely handle the rushing workload is pretty impressive to me. And again, we're not talking about a guy in the G5. This is a Pac-12 running back. He was a long jumper in high school. He played for the track team. Unfortunately, I will say his best 100-meter time is 11.7. Which probably is close to like a 4.840. However, I will say, these guys sometimes can shave off 0.2, 0.3 seconds by the time they do some training and some technique with how to run a 40-yard dash and things like that. So, yeah, if he could get down into, 0.2 coming off that would be about 4.6, 0.25 would be 4.55. If he can get under 4.6 by the time it's combine time and is even close to that 235 pounds, this guy is going to be a big time riser. He had, a lost season in 2020. He was injured. I think Cal played like 2 or 3 games. No, more than that. They played like, I'll tell you. So he played in 3 games. I think as an entire team, they played in like 4. So Cal had 4 games. He played in 3 of them. He wasn't very effective. One of them, I think he was injured for and like suited up, but didn't really play. I'm basically throwing 2020 completely out of consideration here. What he did as a true sophomore was very impressive. And if he is really this size, can bring the 40 I mean, no one's going to draft a running back who runs a 4.8 40. I'm not going to kid you. I don't think 40 is all that. But for running backs, I care a little bit more than wide receivers. And so, yeah, I mean, he's just not even going to get drafted if he runs a 4.8. But for the NFL and for, just for borderline NFL athleticism, I would love to see him down at 4.6 or so. If you can get under 4.6 just for aesthetics, I think he's going to be a very interesting draft prospect. Once people start digging in, they take a look at him, and he gets some basic measurables. He's going to be a riser. Again, all these guys were forgotten, and once they put their mark on the field in 2021, people are gonna go back and realize, in 2019 they were really good, and then 2020 was just a weird season. That's what you're going to hear. Do not get behind the curve. All right, number 2, Riemann Davis. You probably know about him. He's the first of this group who's probably drafted in a lot of areas. He probably is actually on a little more shallower devy. Again, probably last round, but you're talking 5-round devy draft. He'll probably get picked up. So he was at Temple as a freshman in 2019. He is now transferred to Vanderbilt. He's 5'9", a sturdy 215 pounds. He was second in the country in rush market share and dominator rating in 2019 for freshman running backs. So in his class in 2019, he was one of the more dominant running backs. He had a 40% market share for both rushes for his team and dominator rating, which takes into account yards and touchdowns. He was 5th in yards per team play for first-year running backs in the country, which shows some efficiency as well. And he has a personal record of 11-1 in the 100-meter. Now, contrast that with what we just said. Christopher Brown had 11.7. This is getting into like legit 4.6 range, maybe a shade under already. And again, these guys usually get faster on their times because they learn technique and they're more conditioned, et cetera, with a big time, football program. Plus, then they'll do, more explicit training. By the time you get to the combine, you're an expert basically in running the 40. They're not that in high school. So it's very, very common for these guys to shave off probably a lot of wasted movement, probably, shaving off 1/10 of a second just on how good you start off the ground is a big deal. So it's not even that they're getting that much faster once they're in full sprint, but it's technique and things like that by the time they get to the combine, they can do better in. So you're looking at this guy, 5'9", 215. He's got, legitimate speed. I'm not saying he's an absolute burner, but I mean, he's got like requisite minimum speed already kind of posted at an 11-100 meter, which is around 4.6 40. So that should really ease some concerns about like, he did it at Temple or he's a subpar athlete. Now, I will say he does not look to me, once he gets in the open field and he's running straight down the field, he does, he looks fairly fast. He doesn't necessarily have incredible, short area quickness in terms of agility. He's not doing some amazing shifty jukes, spin moves. He's got kind of a jump cut in his repertoire. But mostly, and my good friend at campus2canton.com, Matt Bruning, would say he's got great vision. He loves Davis, and so you won't see him sleeping on Riemann Davis, but he's got good vision, and he's a tough runner. I mean, he's kind of what you would expect, 5'9", 215, good vision, and a quality runner, getting in through those holes, reading his blocks, setting guys up. And if he breaks it fully into the open field, he does have some long speed, in terms of if the play is set up really well, he's got some blocking him. He's not going to absolutely outrace a safety with an angle, but he can take it to the house. Most plays, even at the NFL level, that are 80-yard runs, Sometimes the guy's just fast enough, but a lot of times it's because blocking was perfect and he has just enough speed. I think Riemann Davis, could be that guy, especially, we're talking about a guy who could shave off a little bit coming at 4.5 or so. I mean, we're not worried about 4.5. That's totally fine if he gets in a 40 at 4.5 and 215 or so. I mean, that's probably what Breece Hall is going to be. Now, I think Breece Hall, who will be in the same class, is just generally shiftier, more agility, I think, than Davis. Davis just doesn't show, to me, a ton of agility, but he is pretty good in straight line, and he's got good vision. He's got good feel for the running back position, and he catches passes too. He actually had some nice passes. He had 5%, I think, of his team's receptions in 2019. He caught 15 balls in 12 games, so more than a reception per game. And it came on more at the end of the season. If I can just bear with me here. He did come on more at the end of the season in that freshman year, catching, towards the end of the season, he had 4, 3, 2, 2. In the last 6 games, he had, 4 games over 2 or more receptions. So it really came on a little bit more as a pass catcher in the end of the season there. And I think he can do it. I think he can do that. So you really, he's got a lot of the building blocks that we look for in a guy who could be a 3-down back in the next level. And I think a big thing for him is going to Vandy. Now, Vandy's not very impressive. We don't love the Commodores over here. They're a horrible team in the SEC, and the team is horrible, but the conference and the defenses they play are not horrible. So if he can even be kind of good in the SEC, again, you're looking at a guy whose stock is going to go way, way up. You can get him now for pennies, and at worst, flip him. If he does well in the SEC and you start getting, Keyshawn Vaughn got drafted in the 3rd round, folks. He was a 5th-year senior, who never did anything really until he got to Vandy, for his 4th year and his 5th year. He's old, but he was drafted in the 3rd round of the NFL draft. If Riemann Davis comes in and looks great as a 3rd-year player, junior, in the SEC, maybe scores 10 touchdowns, something like that, shows some good efficiency, dominates their backfield, I'm telling you, he's going to rise in value. So you can get him now, and you're going to spend enough. If he totally busts, who cares? But if he does well, look at what Kevin Harris did. Now, there's some people that don't love Kevin Harris, but for the most part, Kevin Harris is now way, way more valuable than he was prior to last year because he did what he did in the SEC. I'm telling you, that's all That's all you need. So Riemann Davis, keep him on your list. And now we have George Helani. He's my number 1 forgotten player in college football. I think he's a very, very good running back. My biggest problem with Helani is that he's 5'11", so a little tall, and only comes in at 200 pounds. Now, I'd really like to see him be 210, really 215 even. I'd say he runs like he's a bigger player, probably because he's not exceptionally fast in a straight line, and he played in a G5 conference, so some of his metrics aren't going to translate. The G5 drop-off is just really big, but the Mountain West is a respectable G5. It's not like the Sun Belt. Mountain West is a little bit better. You've got some of these borderline teams like they play. I think BYU is technically independent, but they'll play like your BYU. They'll play, some decent teams. Texas Christian used to be there before they made the jump, so it's kind of like Utah used to be there before they made the jump to Pac-12. So I think Boise could actually make the jump soon-ish. They're definitely a glorified G5 team, but a G5 team nonetheless, and they are playing a weaker conference schedule. But in 2019, for first-year running backs, George Helani was 4th in the country in yards per team play. So very, very efficient, especially when you compare him to the other freshmen in that class. He was behind your Breece Hall, your Isaiah Spiller, and Sincere McCormick, who everyone likes those players, but he was 4th behind those big 3 guys in that class. He was also 6th in the country for freshman running backs in rush market share. So he was a volume back, dominating the Boise State backfield. He was a efficient back in yards per team play. I really like all those things. And you're talking about a true freshman, straight out of high school, and doing this at Boise State. He had a 9% team market share for receptions, not yards, receptions. That is a volume stat. 9% of his team's receptions went to George Helani out of the backfield. That's really, really good for a running back. It's really, really good for a freshman running back. That's like a top 20 mark in market share for a freshman running back. Reception market share for a freshman running back since like 2017. So in the 3 years, 17, 18, 19, in all of college football, there were only 20 running backs as freshmen that had a better receiving market share. So very active in the passing game. In terms of what you see on film, he's just really shifty. He's very nuanced. He sets up blocks really well, and he can make the guy miss. He can make, one or two guys miss. He's a quality running back with feel for the position. He is not going to blow you away with long speed or shiftiness or anything like that. I think he's a smoother Riemann Davis. Now, Riemann Davis is good. I just went through praising him. But Helani, he just glides. I really like the way he moves. I think he's silky smooth. And the receiving is kind of what bumped him over Riemann Davis. Riemann Davis can catch the ball, but Helani was an integral part, almost doubled the team market receptions than Davis did for his team at 5%. Helani had 9%. So I really like that. And the receiving is what you look at to say, can this guy be an NFL 3-down back? And when you've got the receiving in your back pocket like that, he's really impressive to me. And it is G5, but Boise State has a reputation for putting backs in the NFL. You've got Doug Martin, you've got Jay Ajayi, Jerry McNichols didn't do well, but was drafted, I think, fairly high, like 3rd round or something like that. Didn't we just have a back go this right? I don't remember who the one was before Helani, but we've had Boise State running backs go to the NFL. So, NFL teams aren't going to be as weird about picking, I think, a Boise State running back. And this is anecdotal, and it's not necessarily analytical, but I think it matters. I mean, if you got a guy coming from, I don't know, let's just say Georgia State, who really has never, I think you have to be better. I think you have to be even better coming from Georgia State than you do from Boise State. There's some name brand recognition with Boise State. If a scout takes a look at that college and he says, oh yeah, Boise State's put some players in the NFL. I think there's just a little bit less of narrative you have to fight. And so, Helani, it is G5, but like I said, it is a premier G5 team, and one that gets a little benefit of the doubt, I think, in terms of the type of players they're recruiting and the type of players that they are putting on to the next level. So I'm a little more confident Helani's going to, if he performs again in 2021 and leaves early, you're talking about a 3rd-year player leaving early and, gets day 2 draft capital. And that goes for anyone. It's not just Helani. I mean, anyone in my mind needs day 2 draft capital to really be taken seriously in fantasy, especially running back for our purposes. And so, I think Helani's got a lot of the ingredients as well, kind of like Christopher Brown, in terms of just a volume guy, pretty efficient, and the receiving production, the ability to catch the ball. And I really like Helani. I think he's got enough pedigree coming from Boise State. I'm not too worried about future draft capital. If he produces in 2021, which I think he will. Now, he only really played, I think, 1 game in 2020 before Boise State again had a bit of a abbreviated season. And then, he didn't opt out, but I think he basically said, like, I'm injured. I'm not going to push it. He played 3 games. Boise State as an entire team, I think, played 7. So abbreviated season. He played 3 games. I don't even think he played a lot in the 3 games. He really played 1. And that 1 game was the opener. And let me give you his stats real quick. He played Utah State, 14 for 100, and then 3 receptions for 33 yards. He scored on the ground. He scored in the air. He had 9 total touches in the other 2 games. So basically, they just weren't even using him. He was basically not playing at all. He played Boise State versus Utah State. He did all that. He also returned a punt against Utah State. So this guy's getting on the field in punt returns. They played Air Force. He had 2 carries and must have gotten injured. And he came back months later, like 6 or 7 weeks later, for the Wyoming game. And he had 3 carries and 4 receptions and he caught a touchdown pass. So when they eased him back in for Wyoming, but he didn't really play a whole lot. But that opener against Utah State was absolutely fantastic, and that's what we expect out of Helani, hopefully in 2021. And so that's my number 1 of the Forgotten 5. To recap, we've got Cameron Ross from Connecticut. We've got Emmerian Brown from South Carolina. Christopher Brown Jr. from Cal. He's a running back. Riemann Davis, running back now at Vanderbilt. And then George Helani, running back, Boise State. I'm very excited about all these guys. This will be up as a article eventually on campus2canton.com. But while you're waiting for the article to drop, if you want to, archive that, still head over to campus2canton.com. We've got all sorts of goodies, other articles. We've got Chris Moxley just joined the fold. He is a great mind, putting down some excellent stuff on paper. We've got your rankings just updated. We have over 700 or 800 total players rankings, but what you're going to go for is probably the 400 individual college players ranked, position specific, and also one big list of all the freshmen to help you with your incoming freshman drafts. We've got 5 people doing those rankings, and we composite them for the average. You can go in. Top 10 are free. After that, you need to get behind our paywall, which is very cheap, only $3 a month. You'll get rankings of the college players for fantasy nobody else has. You'll get Jarek Backus's data app, which is absolutely phenomenal. It's how I found a lot of this stuff. I mean, that's how I went in and filtered. Give me market share for all the second-year backs in 2019. I was able to do that with his app, and then it just spits out, and I can sort by market share, and that's how I know Christopher Brown had the 7th highest market share of any year 2 back in 2019. I could look at it for 2018. I could look at it for year 3 in 2020. I could do whatever I want. You can slice it and dice it in a million ways. And then, of course, there's the graphs, which you've probably seen floating around Twitter. You can plot multiple players based on a metric, and it breaks it down on their data points for year out of high school, so year 1, year 2, year 3. There's another tab that I just described again where you can actually filter it in different ways and get lists of the entire list of every player's market share who was a year 2 back in 2020. Or all freshmen. You can look at every year 1 market share of all time going back to 2006 and see who is the best freshman player in since 2006. I mean, it's phenomenal. It can answer so many questions that you wouldn't have otherwise the ability to answer. Get in there, play with that app. Of course, we have videos, other kinds of content, and then the League Finder, which is great. We've had multiple success stories already of people going to the League Finder and finding their place in the C2C league, which is hard to do. So we want to make this game better. We want to give you the tools necessary, whether it's the app, whether it's this podcast, whether it's other lists, our rankings. We want to give you the tools so you can feel confident going and jumping in, start playing C2C leagues, get comfortable with the college side of fantasy football. It's only going to grow from here. So this is Alfred for Why Wait Till Sunday. Go join and visit the home website, which is campus2canton.com. We will see you next time. Thanks for joining in.